already mailed you, John. And it says, for you, form by in a postcard.
You didn't get that.
I will be back.
Praise to you.
For I am.
Prayerfully and with a faith.
Boy, don't put us up there together. Okay. Anyway, we appreciate all your work. He's probably wondering how we ever got followers.
Oh, I know. You know, you're a great leader. You're a great leader. Go ahead. I know you're going to need another round of applause. I will say this before I start the introduction of our keynote speakers. I've spent 25 years in this organization, 25 of the best years. I learned a lot from Margie, but most of all, I learned respect for our board. And all of us have. Margie, great to celebrate her. It really is. Now, the educational part of our evening. Allow me to introduce the keynote speaker, Mr. Mike Fichter. He is one of our neighbors. He is a Hoosier from Indiana, lives right across the river. And I have his bio here, which is very interesting. He has twice been named one of Indiana's top 50 political figures by Mark. He has served in pro-life leadership roles at the university, local, state, and national level over the course of nearly 3 decades. He has been featured in interviews and quoted in various publications, including US Today, the Washington Post, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, and many others. In addition, he has appeared as a guest on National Public Radio, CNN Radio, American Family News, and many more radio and television outlets. Mike is the author of several books, including his newest, Viability 2.0. Find them out there on the table. I think they're $15. The pro-life movement, what it must do to win the cultural tipping point. This book was just released, and I think you'll find it wonderful. In 2017, Mike founded a new national organization called Love Times 2, or Love X2, focus on ending abortion through Christ-centered cultural change. He is the host of the Love X2 podcast found on Apple Podcasts. He currently serves as the president and CEO of Indiana Right to Life. He and his wife, Robin, recently celebrated the 35th anniversary, as well as the birth of their second grandchild. So would you please join me in a warm welcome for our keynote speaker, Mr. Mike Fichter.
Okay, my mic's working great, that's fine. I don't typically use the boom mic, so this one's on the side here. And I think we're going to have an informative 30 minutes or so. I'm looking forward to really Louisville's just really a cool place for us. My wife and I raised our kids. We were in Evansville, so it's an easy drive over here, so we did a lot of stuff on local. In fact, one of the footnotes is that my last extreme ride was the chain roller coaster at Kentucky Kingdom. And I came out of retirement for the Hulk at Universal Studios. That was a mistake. I remember that day, and that was a really cool time. It's sad to see your baseball stadium sitting there empty right now. And I've just got to ask this question. I started doing this in Indiana. I have no idea what the response is going to be here, but I started doing this in Indiana when I go around the state. And I can pretty much tell you every part of Indiana where the answers are going to be. So I'm going to ask you tonight, in this community, how many St. Louis Cardinal fans do we have in the room tonight? How many Cincinnati Red fans do we have? I was asked actually as a Pirates fan, I forgive you for those games in the 70s where the Big Red Machine knocked us out of the playoffs. Anyways, I love baseball. I love your stadium, but it's so sad to see it empty. But this is the times in which we are in right now. I just got to say right in front to you. I say Louisville all the time. I say Louisville. As I've met a lot of you, I hear Louisville, I hear everything in between. I may mess it up. I don't hate on the Hoosier, I'm saying Louisville. That's just the way I say it. I got to say it reminds me of this time. I worked at a meatpacking plant 7 years as I put myself through college. It was an interesting experience. I can tell you everything about how sausages made, stuff like that. So full-time factory worker, full-time maintenance student, getting my bachelor's. I'm sure the guys on the line just were tired of the college kid. So one day they set me up big time. And they're like having this big conversation. I'm a know-it-all college kid at that time. And they said, hey Mike, we're having this big conversation about how do you properly pronounce the capital of Kentucky. How do you pronounce it? And so I said Louisville. Then I got in deeper waters. I got to get in deeper waters, so I said, I'll know it's Louisville because my sister goes to Western Kentucky University. She's a hilltopper. She goes there all the time. She says Louisville, so I know it's Louisville. I said, wow, how do you pronounce it? He just looks at me and goes, Frankfurt. Okay, the term mic drop wasn't around back in 1984. That was a mic drop moment. You don't know what you don't know. Okay, but one thing I know with absolute 100% certainty here tonight, and that is every single one of you is in this room for a specific purpose tonight. There is no mistake for every single one of you being here tonight. Every single one of you. Even if you were dragged here by a spouse, you are here for a reason tonight. So I'm going to pray, and we're going to get this thing started. Father, I just pray that tonight you reveal to every single person sitting here tonight what exactly the purpose is for them specifically to be in this room tonight as well as for myself. Just pray that you do some amazing things through everyone who is in this room tonight to protect unborn kids and their moms. Pray in Jesus' name. Amen. All right. Okay, here we go, folks. I'm going to start this off and say, I absolutely love history. If you're around me for any moment of time at all, I love history. I'm that guy. Okay, I'm that guy for following them around. That when you see a historical marker, the lights go on. My wife's like, what are you doing? I'm like, historical marker. I put the turn signal on, so I love history. I love history, and the things that really fire me up, that I'm really deep into, is anything Civil War and anything Lewis and Clark. And that is so intertwined between Indiana and Kentucky, both the Civil War and Lewis and Clark. There's debate on this. Many historians look at the Falls of the Ohio as the starting point of the Lewis and Clark journey, because that's where they recruited the 9 young men from Kentucky. I hope you know that story. 9 young men from Kentucky, they were legends. A bunch of them were right here in Jefferson County. In fact, my wife and I spent a half day across the river, somewhere between, I'm not going to tell you where it is, you have to find it yourself, but somewhere between Gordon and Elizabethtown. We drove around for literally half a day, finding the burial spot of John Shields, a Little Flock Baptist Cemetery. It's way back in the woods, it's like a private property, but then you can drive back there. He was a member of the Corps of Discovery. He was a gunsmith and a blacksmith. He took care of all that stuff on the trip. So Lewis and Clark stuff, it's everywhere. My wife and I would follow the Lewis and Clark Trail. We've done all kinds of stuff with that. Civil War, when you look at Kentucky and Indiana, Kentucky and Indiana played such pivotal roles in the Civil War. Look at Kentucky. I don't know how many of you know this or not, but when you look at Kentucky, you see, of course you know Abraham Lincoln was born here. Jesse Grant was born here in Kentucky. John Buford, the cavalry general, Gettysburg fame. John Buford was born here in Kentucky. And Kentucky, because of its pivotal situation, where you guys are situated at, as well as being bordered by 3 major rivers, because of Kentucky's situation, the Underground Railroad came through Kentucky. The Underground Railroad had to go through Kentucky. More or less, you're going to try and get across the Ohio into the north. So Kentucky played an absolute pivotal role in this. So when you look at the history of Kentucky, battles like Camp Wildcat and Mills Freeze, those were 2 of the earliest Union victories of the war. I'm not sure how many people know that, but at the Battle of Perryville actually ended all Confederate hope of controlling Kentucky. So there's pivotal relationship with history, the Civil War, Indiana, Kentucky, all of this. But there's one name that most of you in this room, unless you're a history guy, you've never heard of. And his name is Bart Mitchell. Bart Mitchell was buried in Hartsville, Indiana, about an hour and a half north of here. Bart Mitchell, mainly an unknown guy, but played a pivotal role in the American Civil War and one of the strangest things that happened during the entire war. It started back in September 1862. What was happening at that time in 1862? Robert E. Lee decided he was going to take the war to the north. He was going north with it. He was tired of defending Richmond. So he knew that if he threatened the north, that the north would have to withdraw its troops. They were going to try and provide a buffer between Lee's forces and the forces that were to defend the Washington, D.C. So what happens during this time is Lee creates this really risky, dramatic plan. As he's heading north into Maryland, he's going up there, South Mountain and the Shenandoah. That ridge was guarding a lot of his actions. He split his forces into 3 different forces, a very dangerous thing in the military maneuver. He split his forces into 3. He detailed the roads they were going to take. He detailed the timing of it. He detailed Harper's Ferry when it was going to be taken. He detailed every single bit of it, down to the period. And he issued a special order 191. He had copies of it made, and copies of it were sent to all of his generals so that everybody was operating in the same vein. And enter Martin Mitchell. Because in September 1862, Martin Mitchell, a Union cavalry officer, actually not a cavalry, but a Union officer, found this envelope lying on the ground in an area that the Confederates had just vacated. And in this envelope were 3 cigars, and they were wrapped by a piece of paper. Guess what that piece of paper was? It was a copy of Lee's Special Order 191. Martin Mitchell, Hartsville, Indiana, had found Lee's exact game plan. The miracle actually percolated all the way up in a hurry into the hands of General George McClellan. And McClellan read it. He had somebody on the staff who recognized the handwriting as one of Lee's subordinates. And he said, I know that's legit. That's legit. This isn't a setup. This is legit. So McClellan made this comment that said, I now know what Robert E. Lee is going to do. And he said, if I cannot whip Bobby Lee, I'm willing to go home. Famous last words from George McClellan. What did that lead to? That led to the invasion of Maryland and what is still known today, the bloodiest single day in American military history, the Battle of Antietam. And while McClellan failed to crush Lee's army, and he did, he loved history, read it. McClellan had this opportunity that opened in late afternoon at Antietam where he could have crushed Robert E. Lee's army and divided it and conquered it and had an absolute no contest win at Antietam. Failed to do that. But what he did do was present a marginal enough victory that President Lincoln was looking for to produce the Emancipation Proclamation. Lincoln had the Emancipation Proclamation drafted. He knew that he wanted, but he was waiting for a Union victory. McClellan delivered it, and historians today will still debate how well did George B. McClellan use the information that he received when he had Special Orders 191 in his hand. But the one thing that cannot be argued, you cannot argue from history otherwise. The one thing that cannot be argued is that George McClellan knew exactly what Robert E. Lee was going to do because he had his entire plan right in his hands. We're going to fast forward now from that historical step into 2020, where we find ourselves right here in America. It's a different nation, different point in time, but in the same way, this nation is defining who it is and who it will be moving forward. We're defining what type of nation we're going to be. In the Civil War, we were defining who we are going to be in the context of the evil of human slavery. And now here we find ourselves in a multitude of different things, but we're asking ourselves, in 2020, are we going to dehumanize unborn children and continue to dehumanize unborn children? This is the cultural struggle, one of many, that we are facing right now in America. And here's how it all wraps together. I think I'm getting a history lecture here, but here's where it wraps together. Just like McClellan knew what Lee was going to do, we know exactly what abortion supporters are doing. We know exactly what their plan is. They're not hiding it. This isn't something that is hidden. In fact, if you Google Planned Parenthood 3-part plan, you will find a document that will show exactly what their strategic plan is for abortion in the United States. This is not a mystery. It's not something that they're keeping hidden away that we got to guess what they're doing. We know exactly what they're doing. It is right out there. They're telling us exactly what to do. You need to know tonight that Kentucky, just like Indiana, is literally at ground zero of the abortion battle in the United States. Your Attorney General just spoke of some of the battles that are being faced here in the Commonwealth of Kentucky. That is not by mistake, folks. That is not by mistake. You are at point zero, and I would say also you are a test market. Whether you realize it or not, Kentucky, in a lot of ways, is a test market. And I believe it's that way for a lot of different reasons. We've been incredibly effective at passing pro-life laws here in the state of Kentucky. Those laws are going to percolate up and lead to the reversal of Roe versus Wade. But because of your effectiveness in passing pro-life laws, you are a threat to the abortion industry. That's the way they view the Commonwealth of Kentucky. And what you need to understand tonight is they're not concerned about the West Coast. They're not concerned about the East Coast. They're not concerned about Illinois. They're concerned about states like Kentucky. And that's why you're at ground zero. That's why you are a test market. I was looking at your program now. The network of pregnancy centers that you have here in Kentucky is absolutely phenomenal. The fact that you have a network of centers reaching women with pro-life alternatives to abortion means you're a threat to the abortion industry. When you look at the Kentucky abortion numbers, the ones that I found online, maybe they're even better than this right now. You're at a high of 11,631 in 1988, and you were at 3,203. That's a 73% drop. Way to go, Kentucky. When the abortion industry looks at that, you're an absolute threat. You're an absolute threat to the abortion industry. We understand this, abortion groups understand it. That's why we know what their three-part plan is and what they're moving forward. And what we're going to do is walk through. I'll tell you exactly what their three-part plan is, what their plan is, and what Kentucky's role is in it. Strategy number one, straight from their own documentation. Strategy number one, relying on federal judges to be the firewall that keeps Roe from ever being reversed. That's number one. I know that we're encouraged and we think that a lot more conservative justices in the court system right now. But while we have that optimism, I guarantee you the abortion industry is not conceding the reversal of Roe versus Wade. They're fighting to make sure that it never is reversed in the lifetime of every single person in this room. And over the past 3 weeks, we can see, I know, in Indiana, we've taken a beating the last 3 weeks. Kentucky's taken a beating over the last year. And we've taken a beating in the federal courts, so we can see how effective their strategy has been. Just on June 30th. On June 30th, the United States Supreme Court struck down the Louisiana law in June Medical Services versus Russo. That was a court battle a lot of folks have been watching because that was the first opportunity the court might have, a willing court, could have taken that opportunity to say, we're going to address Roe. They didn't do that. Chief Justice Roberts sided with the majority on that court. It is a very disappointing, very troubling, very ominous sign. I think it points to the fact that we need one, maybe two more pro-life justices on the Supreme Court if we're going to see Roe reversed. They are not conceding that point. This past Friday, federal judges struck down Indiana law that requires abortion complications be reported. And they said it was too vague. The Indiana law lists like 20 complications. It could not be clearer. So here are the complications. If this happens and a woman is injured this way in an abortion, you need to report this to the State Department of Health. Federal judge strikes it down. 2 days after June Medical was announced on June 30th, so we're talking to what, July 1st, July 2nd, the United States Supreme Court rejected Indiana's appeal over a federal judge who allowed an abortion clinic to open in South Bend, Indiana without state licensing. The state denied the license, and the federal judge says they get to open anyway. They're running that state license. And that was appealed all the way up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court rejected that appeal. And if you paid attention to the news this week, on Monday, a Maryland federal judge ruled that the dangerous RU486 chemical abortion drug doesn't have to be administered in person. It can now be provided by mail or whatever else. There's a suit going on to get the FDA to make RU486 available over the counter. This is not by accident. The federal judiciary has been blocking pro-life laws again and again and again and again. When Indiana's final humane disposition bill was upheld by the court last year, it's one of the few pro-life victories that we've seen anywhere in the country in the last 10 years. At least, thank God in Indiana, that bill that requires cremation or burial of an aborted child has been upheld by the United States Supreme Court. We're in a crisis in the courts, and we all know that. And this crisis is something that the ACLU and Planned Parenthood are relying on. They are relying on crisis in the courts, federal firewall. They're relying on that to keep Roe from ever being reversed in our lifetime. But there is hope. When we look at last week's religious liberty win by Little Sisters of the Poor, there's a positive thing we can hang our hat on. Maybe there's some progress that's happening right there. But when the abortion clinics see that, they're worried because they only want the religious liberty aspect to win in the courts. They don't want it to be a religious liberty issue. They want it to be a forced, accept, and pay for abortion issue. The point is, they think they can keep Roe in place through a furious assault in the courts. But if that doesn't work, then they're already down the road with the second part of the strategy. Strategy number 2, from their own documentation. At the same time that they're working to reverse Roe, they are creating broad regional alliances and networks that will keep abortion going even if Roe versus Wade falls. This is why Planned Parenthood of Washington, Idaho, Alaska, and the Hawaiian Islands took over Planned Parenthood of Indiana and Kentucky last year. Did you all know that happened? I'm not sure if it was covered much in the news. Think about that. It's actually the first time in Planned Parenthood's history that a geographic merger would happen that made no geographic sense. Indiana and Kentucky used to be separate, then became Planned Parenthood of Indiana and Kentucky. What happened last year was not a merger, it was a takeover. And Indiana and Kentucky's Planned Parenthoods were taking over Washington State. Washington State, see a lot about Washington State in the news right now. Washington State, Alaska, Idaho, Hawaiian Islands. Why? Their own CEO said why. In the Seattle Times, she admitted she was they have huge donors in the Pacific Northwest. She didn't say this, I'll say it for her. They were basically bored. There's no challenges in the Pacific Northwest for progressive. They own the landscape. They own everything. They own the playing field. Their challenge was she has donors, big donors, millionaire donors in the Pacific Northwest that they wanted to pick a state like Kentucky and a state like Indiana. I'll tell you exactly why they will do that right now. They believe that they can break the back of the pro-life movement in Kentucky, they can break it anywhere. As you're sitting here tonight, thinking about your state that you love, the movement that you've invested your life into, there are people out of the Pacific Northwest that are sending ungodly amounts of money into this state because they believe if they can break the back of the pro-life movement in Kentucky, they can break it anywhere. And within this, the Planned Parenthood is building all these new alliances. That's why, after the last election cycle, Planned Parenthood put out this glowing thing, what they refer to as a rainbow wave that swept over the state of Kentucky. That's the way Planned Parenthood positioned it. Why would Planned Parenthood, that historically has been focused on abortion, be talking about a rainbow wave in the state of Kentucky? Because it's about alliances. It's about building political alliances, and this is part of their overall strategy. And when we look at the results of this, right here, in Louisville, how long was it after the last election cycle when Planned Parenthood announced, we're going to start doing abortions in Louisville? 4 weeks, 5 weeks, 6 weeks, elections have consequences. We all know that. And part of the consequence here is the establishment of regional hubs. This is why they secretly worked on the 18,000 square foot abortion facility across the river in St. Louis. This is why. This is exactly why. Regional abortion hubs. Abortion industry understands what many in the pro-life movement have not yet grasped. And that is, even if Roe is reversed, it doesn't mean abortion ends in the United States. If Roe is reversed at its best level, the courts will say, states, you decide. They're going to push it back to the states and let the states decide. Planned Parenthood and the abortion industry understands that. It also explains the third part of the strategy. They're working to reach the cultural tipping point. That's the focal point of the book that was mentioned just a few minutes ago. Primarily, there's millennials and Generation Z, all under the age of 40, 45, whatever timeline you want to look at. Why? Because when you change the culture, the politics will follow the culture every single time. Picture a stream. Culture is always upstream. Politics is always downstream. I could point to any one of a number of issues to make that point tonight. I'm not going to go into all those. You can think about it yourself. Culture is here. Wherever the culture is, it's the leading indicator of where the politics is going to go every single time. And we have very much reason to be concerned. I don't know if you've seen these studies. They're 2020 studies. 2020 studies. Just last week, Arizona Christian University released the results of a study that shows only 39%, fewer than 4 in 10 Americans, agree with the statement that life is sacred. That is a cultural problem in a very big time way. Of those who answered it, 1 out of 8 Americans now believe, according to the study, that human beings are both material substance, biological machines. Another 1 of 8 believes that we're part of the mind of the universe. More than 1 in 3 Americans believe that life is what you make it, but it has no absolute value. And 1 in 10 agree that life does not attain full value until we reach our highest point of evolution and expression. I don't even know what that means, but it troubles me. This is what 3 out of 10 Americans believe. We have fewer than 4 in 10 Americans who believe life is sacred. And we also see church numbers plummeting. Barnard reports that church attendance in the last 20 years in America has been cut in half. And I just saw yesterday in my newsfeed that since the pandemic has set in, 1/3 of those attending churches aren't going to church in person anymore, but they're not even watching online, so there's even a further decline. Why does that matter? Why does that matter? Because the church is the influence of salt and life that says, what's the core reason life has intrinsic value? Because life is created in the image of God. Where does that come from? It comes from a biblical worldview. It comes from the church. What's happening is this collision course in America right now, where the culture is drifting away from biblical values. And where are they going to make their presentation, whether life has value or not? And how tragic it is that in the culture being torn right now, the community has been torn, across America has been torn, over these discussions on the value of human life and human justice. But if we take God out of the equation and say there is no intrinsic value to anybody's life, the question then becomes, why does life of any color matter? If we're going to take God out of the equation and say there is no core intrinsic value to any unborn child's life or any human's life, where do we assign the value? Who assigns the value? Who assigns the value in a world in which there's no God given value to human life? Somebody's going to give the value. Who's it going to be? The abortion industry understands that. They understand there is a huge cultural groundswell that's starting to move in their favor. Last year, Gallup poll reported that for the first time, the group, I think it's 18 to 34-year-olds, 55% responded positively to this question that abortion is morally acceptable. 10 years ago, when they asked that question, only 45% of that age. That's not an aberration, by the way. I have friends who say, well, maybe it's a bad year. I can show you on the chart the Gallup poll. It's going up from 45 to 55%. It's on a continuous line. So what on earth is a tipping point? What's this I'm talking about? Tipping point is a point of no return. Or as I say, cows out of the barn, it's not coming back. Again, if we have time tonight, I could put a host of issues on the table and say, this issue, that issue, that issue, tipping points have already been reached in our culture. It's critically important that reaching the cultural tipping point does not mean the abortion industry is trying to get everybody to like abortion. That's not their goal. That is not the goal. That's not how you reach a tipping point. They're not trying to get unanimous consensus that, oh, we all agree that abortion is good. They don't care about that. They care about it. And it's the dominant philosophy of the younger generations coming up if we don't change it. Where they're going to get is, I may not like it, but I don't have a right to tell somebody else what they can and cannot do. We did extensive focus groups and research in Indiana. And I can tell you by sitting in these groups, these professional groups that bring people in and have these discussions with targeted age groups and stuff like that, you just ask them different questions on this. I tell you across the board, we heard a lot of gray areas, a lot of everybody has a different story, a lot of I can tell somebody else what to do. The guys, every single guy in the focus group said, I don't really have the right to say anything about it. It's a woman's choice. It's her issue. One man in the focus group. And a good focus group, you don't come people know what to say. One young man in the focus group got up and talked about his girlfriend becoming pregnant and how much she wanted this thing. He was looking forward to it. He was excited about it and everything. But he said, but after all, she wanted the abortion, so I drove her to the abortion clinic because it's her choice anyway.